Hey everyone, I'm Steven.
And I'm April. And this is your weekly dose of what's new, what matters, and what's changing in the world of ABA and ethical business leadership.
We're live every Monday to bring you the headlines, insight, and honest conversation you won't hear anywhere else.
And if you're catching this on Tuesday, welcome to the podcast version, where we turn real-time updates into lasting takeaways.
This is the ABA Business Leaders News Update, powered by 3Pi Squared.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ABA Business Leaders News. So for a couple of weeks here in July, we're lightening our load because we're taking time off. So we're just doing the Tuesday release for a couple of weeks. So if you're worried that you missed the live yesterday, you did not. But in a couple of weeks, we'll be back to the lives on Monday. So that has not stopped. We're just taking a couple weeks off.
Good.
So, all right, on to the news for today. When schools ban ABA therapists, lessons from Kansas, and a wake-up call for ABA providers. All right, so we're in Kansas for this story.
Not in Kansas anymore.
No, we're not in Kansas anymore. So a Kansas school district's decision to ban in-school ABA therapists highlights a nationwide tension between outside providers and public education systems. While some parents and staff praise the positive impact of ABA in classrooms, district leaders cited logistical, legal, and collaboration issues as reasons for the new policy. This move echoes a growing trend. When collaboration breaks down, access to life-changing ABA services can disappear overnight. For ABA providers, it's a wake-up call. Partnership and humility are essential, not optional, for sustainable school-based care. So what's happening? Things are happening like super quick.
No, I mean this district USD 835 board voted to remove 383. I apologize. And remove outside ABA therapists from the classroom, and so they were allowing them in, and now they are no longer allowing them in.
So I'm curious how many school districts across the country are allowing outside ABA therapists into the schools, because in our little area of Northern Virginia, as of a few years ago, it had been a few years that they had stopped allowing it. Right. So we had to pivot years ago with this because they decided no longer would they allow outside ABA providers in.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the story that, you had a really good relationship with some of the local schools, and then for whatever reason it seemed like maybe some people came in and were telling them what to do instead of asking them how they can help.
Yeah.
And that seemed to cause them to say, all right, everybody out.
Well, and two, sometimes if the tech coming into the school isn't abiding by the school rules. And so within our company, we followed the school rules as best as we could. Like we expected our techs who went into the schools to have the same dress code. I would reach out to the principal and find out what's the dress code even, so that we could fit in as much as possible. But two, sometimes it's not just the BCBA, it could be the tech who's overstepping in a classroom. And I'm not saying that it's all the ABA providers' fault. I'm sure and as we're about to learn more, it's from multiple views.
Yeah, I mean, in this story, there's not a ton of information, but it didn't sound like it was because of any issues with one particular it wasn't like, oh, ABA is bad. It seems like, I don't know, the sense I got from the story was maybe you can't have 15 techs in the classroom. That would get a lot, right? Yeah. Like how many extra adults can you have in the classroom? Right. And then how many one-on-ones can you have within the classroom without it being disruptive? Correct.
And then also like legalities, right?
Right.
Like I'm sure that some districts, because we even had that issue with some private schools that we
Right.
went into, even private preschools, you know, where we really had to sit down and discuss what that would look like and who would be responsible if certain things happened, right?
Right.
Because of just the logistics of, you know, liability. So, well, let's go on to the key points here. So you already mentioned the first one. The district cited the need for legal clarity and consistent educational approaches as reasons for the change. Oh, well. Parents and students gave emotional testimony about the real benefits of in-school ABA, including skill gains and friendship.
Yeah, I mean, one of the parents was quoted in the story like, my child is able to make friends now, and you know, able to learn at school, where before they were really struggling, and so like it wasn't like any yay, no more ABA, right? It was people seemed fairly upset.
Well, even now, this has been even more years ago, but in South Carolina, I was able to go into schools as like what we called back then, like shadowing, right? And so essentially I was a one-on-one instructional aide or, you know, support staff or paraprofessional for a particular child, for several different particular childs within this, you know, children within the school day. But they didn't, and part of the reason why I was allowed in at that time was because they didn't have any service like that within the school. And the school didn't have to pay for me. The family was paying for me.
Right.
You know, there was some like waivers and stuff in South Carolina at the time that were also paying. So they were like, sure, you want to come on in and give us an extra hand and help us with this child who we're not quite sure how to help? Go for it. And that was, but I can imagine now with the liabilities and stuff that we're talking about, but also in the amount of people in the classroom, like we were talking about. But I do know that it's hard. It's probably just as hard for schools to find staff as it is for ABA business, like paraprofessionals, you know, like I'm wondering if that's a hard job to find. And so once you pull out the ABA, the private ABA from the school, like does a school have the staff to be able to support these students in the same way that the ABA provider was, supporting them within the school?
I'm working with a company right now, and they are putting a bid into a school to help create the special needs programming because they don't have any right now. So, and I don't even understand how that's a possible thing, right?
Yeah.
So, and they were going in school to provide services, and then their funders said, whoa, you're not allowed to do that.
Well, that's
right?
what I was going to say. I'm also curious of what funders are allowing you to go into public school, because that's a hard thing to find these days too. So the policy does not ban ABA itself, but restricts therapy to outside of classroom hours or settings. The story is a cautionary tale. School-based ABA works only when there's ongoing respectful partnership. Now, some schools have ABA programs, and, you know, even within one school district, there may be certain schools that are like tagged for like this school provides ABA. Because I know in some districts I have friends where they work, like maybe one elementary school had an actual ABA department within the school, but another school within the district didn't. So they were like trying to get their child moved to the one that had ABA. But of course, then you can only take so many kids, right? So recommendations for you guys as providers: build strong collaborative relationships with school districts from the outset. I think we've covered that a good bit during this conversation. Approach school partnerships with humility, flexibility, and respect for the roles of teachers and staff. Be transparent about your role and goals, focused on supporting the whole classroom, not just your client. And that's what you have to be careful with that as well, because I think that's part of it. But that's where the communication with the staff and the teachers can go a long way of, okay, how can I help? Because, you know, you're depending, especially if a funder's paying for you just to work with this one child, you can't necessarily work with other kids like in the same way, but there are things that you can do. So like have a conversation of how can I help within the boundary, the guidelines that I have. Advocate for memorandums of understanding to clarify responsibilities and ensure continuity. Invest in staff training on collaboration, advocacy, and school-based best practices to prevent breakdowns. Absolutely. I think all of those pieces are about communication and collaboration and understanding. And then also, I'm just really curious, seriously, who's still
going in
public schools providing services where they're not being blocked from
by
many barriers.
The school or the funder.
Yeah. Very curious.
Yep.
All right. Well, moving on to the next one for today. Ooh, this one looks spicy. RFK Jr., Dr. Oz, and the end of prior authorizations, what ABA owners need to know. I've been seeing this stuff on social media, and before I even go here, like my thought was, well, okay, it sounds really great, but what happens if then they deny stuff after it's been done?
Yeah.
So the story.
I mean, the thing is, they deny stuff even with a pre-auth in place.
Yeah. Well, let's see what this has to say, because this is new information to me. The story: Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Oz made headlines by vowing to eliminate prior authorizations for medical treatment, a process that's long frustrated both clinicians and families. For ABA business owners, this could be a game changer. Prior authorizations currently slow down the start of ABA services, drain admin resources, and too often disrupt continuity of care. Industry leaders are watching closely to see if this campaign promise leads to real payer reforms. If so, it could fundamentally change how ABA practices handle insurance approvals, reduce wait lists, and get kids the care they need faster. My question is, though, like with ABA, it's so tricky of whether insurance covers it or not. Is that going to change those?
Well, you can still do benefit checks, so you just don't do a pre-auth, right? Like, I know we were used to getting our pre-auths like quite quickly, within a few days typically. But, someone in our Facebook group said, how long does it take to get a pre-auth? And I was like, I think normally it would take us a couple of days. And somebody said it's taking me 2 weeks.
Oh, so I guess that could be a barrier to getting care started. Huh.
Yeah.
That's a long time. All right, key points. Prior authorizations are required by most ABA funders and create significant barriers to timely care. Now, obviously, if they're working on this, then it must be across more medical professions and services than I realized.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, we had, you can buy insurance plans that require pre-auth a lot more, right? Like ours was PPO, and it didn't require any pre-authorization to go see a specialist, right? But
some people in that referral, okay.
Yeah, some plans require you get a pre-authorization, like a referral from a doctor, right?
So, like, you go to your family doctor, you're a general practitioner, and you want to go to the dermatologist, let's say,
Correct.
and then you can get a referral, but then you have to have pre-authorization.
I'm assuming that's really what they're talking about here. Mostly is this needing referrals and pre-authorizations for things like that, right? Where you don't need a pre-auth for a heart transplant. I'm sorry, right? There may be immediate things, and if you're on a wait list, even if it's a short wait list for some emergency care, right? This could be a problem. And so really where it hits ABA is you plan for those delays, and reauthorization really was the big issue for us, where sometimes you would have to submit it 4 weeks in advance, right? And, I forgot. Now we have a gap in services. What are we going to do? Are they going to backdate it? No, they're not going to, So I think that's really where these, the other thing is that it will stop this whole issue of, I didn't get enough hours. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
Well, like in a pre-authorization, you get a certain number of parent training hours, certain number of assessment hours.
Then how do you figure that out?
Well, I assume that they'll have some rules around that, right? But like, then you know what the rules are, and you can follow those rules, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like I assume that you wouldn't need to, again, we ran into this issue a lot in the summers when everybody wanted to attend social skills groups. So then we had to do another authorization to get those social skills groups hours to the kids that qualified to come to the social skills group, right? So like that kind of stuff, I assume you can completely avoid, right?
That makes sense.
And it's just a lot of paperwork, right? It's a lot of justification that may not necessarily be needing that justification.
Well, to go over the rest of the key points, RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz have made national news with their pledge to reform this system. Insurers, providers, and families all acknowledge that current pre-auth processes cause delays and frustration. Removing or streamlining prior authorizations would save time, reduce stress, and allow ABA practices to focus on clinical quality, not paperwork. Actual change will depend on regulatory follow-through and payer compliance, so ABA owners must stay informed. Okay, so recommendations for you guys. Monitor developments around prior authorization at both state and federal levels, and stay tuned here. We'll try to keep you updated as quickly as possible. Streamline your current intake and authorization processes to minimize delays. Educate families on the realities of insurance requirements so they can prepare for possible system changes. Advocate with payers and policymakers for a more efficient, family-centered approach to approvals. Use this moment to examine other barriers in your workflow that could be improved. So if the intention behind all of this is to reduce the time it takes to get someone started in therapy or accessing medical care, and being able to continue that medical care without gaps, then yes, that would be responsible for us as owners to look at what other parts of our flows can we change to or tweak to try to keep things moving.
Yeah, and I don't think, it hasn't been released yet, but we did that podcast with Dan and Mike, right? And they had a great example on there where the funder was like, you can only do 2 hours of auth or 2 hours of assessment a day. And then they were like, no, this isn't how we're going to do this. And they fought for that and got it's stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? That hopefully.
I didn't even think about that.
Issues will cause that stuff to be done.
But then there's worry that, okay, what if we do these things and they don't pay for it, and then we have nothing no ground to stand on. So with change comes a little bit of worry.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there would be, because and we had our podcast with Selna, right? Jeff at Selna, and I honestly, again, I didn't have an issue so much with pre-auths. It actually gave me some comfort because I knew, okay, everything's been approved. But like I said at the start of this, they still denied claims, right? True. They still did recoupment audits. And then, the other thing is that if everybody across the board just stops doing this, right, it may just be easier overall, right? And maybe that will reduce this burden of paperwork and justification and needing X amount of goals to do X amount of hours. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be the ideal world. Now, does it really mean that or not? I don't know. But, you know what I mean? I guess we'll just have to see.
Makes sense.
But again, I was coming at it from a perspective of a couple of days we're going to have a pre-auth, right? Where other people,
it seems weeks now. Yeah,
it seems like this is not the way it is anymore, right? So, yeah. Okay, that's it. We have two today.
That's it for today. Yep. All right. Well, I hope everyone is having a great week. It's a big week, right? It's a big Halloween. Oh my goodness. Halloween. It is not Halloween.
Happy Canada
Holiday week. We have Canada Day.
Happy birthday.
Have birthdays for the two of us. And we have 4th of July. So it's a lot
July 1st, Canada Day.
That's what I said.
That's my birthday.
Yeah. And then I'm July 3rd. It's my birthday.
Well, we're giving PHI on.
We're giving PHI. I don't care. Whatever. We can give our own birth dates.
Yeah, I'm just
I guess.
With.
Oh, you're being funny.
Yes.
Okay. My brain's already on vacation mode, so I don't know. Anyways, well, thank you so much for spending time with us and catching up on the news, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, and like and subscribe or review and rate or whatever.
All the things.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Don't miss an update. Sign up for weekly alerts at news.3pisquared.com. It's the easiest way to stay informed and ahead.
If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and share the podcast. It helps us reach more people who care about ethical, sustainable ABA.
We'll see you next Monday live or Tuesday right here on the podcast. We're April and Steven, and this is ABA Business Leaders News Update.